Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Administration Policy Rules Committee agenda, where Joe Boykin, Councilmember Joe Boykin, Councilmember Honeycutt, and Councilmember Middleton, we, as myself, as well as the chair, resides on this committee. First item of business is the approval of minutes.
Move to approve.
Second. Any deletion or additions? No discussion? And all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, ayes have it. All right, so the agenda item request to consider is attendance via video conference, and I don't know, did staff come up with any policies with everybody else around us? I don't think we did.
No, sir. What we did was we gathered the policies that other counties who allow attendance by video conference use, and I thought we would present those to y'all, and if y'all could give us feedback about what y'all want, then we can come up with a rule after that for y'all to consider.
All right, is someone ready to give us what they said, or y'all want to send it out, or it'll be on the...
It was in your agenda
In your
packet.
agenda, everybody
Yes, sir.
has it?
Yeah, but can you give a briefing just for the purpose of the public who's here listening?
Sure. The, let's see, it's, of course, varied by county. Most counties do not allow attendance by video conference. There are 3 that do allow it outside of emergency settings. And so Greenville County allows it at any time. No limit. You can attend by video conference or by telephone. Pickens County limits attendance to twice per calendar year. And then Richland County, I believe when I look at their rule, it only applies to emergency situations, the same as we currently allow right now. Their clerk indicated they don't just use it during emergency situations, but if you look at what their rules have written, that's what the rule seems to indicate. And then Greenwood County allows it when there's a valid reason from the county council member, as long as they give 24 hours notice.
Okay. All right, any discussion from council members on this committee, and then we'll go to those who are here for their comments.
So again, Mr. Chair, I certainly would advocate based on Greenville, and you know, Greenville is a credible county, comparable, you know, to ours, that we could use as a real litmus. It's not a small county, and definitely, you know, based on the allowable usage of this particular policy, you know, it's not restrictive, but at the same token, you know, it would have to be substantiated by some sort of valid reason. Definitely, no one is trying to come virtually in lieu of coming in person. I think all of us, you know, have a commitment to being here in person, but there are those times, particularly when we are literally on the screen and are actively participating because we've unmuted, we've made comments, but you just can't vote, and there is still that, you know, audible, you know, announcement that you're absent when you're present. And so I would certainly advocate for us to adopt something that allows, in circumstances, individuals to exercise that option.
Okay, anybody else? Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, you know, I think that I think that we definitely allow it during emergencies, which is something that we certainly should do, and I think that is something that we do need to craft something that if we do have an emergency and we can't come here to have a meeting, that we can call a meeting and be able to vote off-site. But I prefer people to be here to vote. I think that when somebody is here by Zoom and watching and participating, they even can talk and add to the conversation. But I believe that you should have to be here to vote. But I think that if you are here and on a Zoom, that you should be afforded some sort of presence, that you're not here, but you're on the Zoom. I think you should get some sort of acknowledgement that you are present and that you participated in the conversation. But I still believe that you have to be present. You should be present to vote unless it's an emergency situation.
Okay, Mr. Kabrowski, then I come down to Mr. Boykin.
Well, thank you. I respect what Councilman Middleton said and Chairman Sass. I think my observation has been that being here in person does add the cordiality, getting to know each other. Just the little conversations you have before a meeting kind of helps. And if you see each other as the snack room before and after, it kind of builds relationships and helps you talk to each other about things that come up. And I noticed the thing of Greenville. I'm very proud that we do all have very good relationships and can communicate if we disagree or not. It's something about being present. I noticed in Greenville they had fistfights at their thing. So not being personally present, but I just, and I had the experience of being on the State Board of Education during COVID when people weren't there, and we had things you can vote that way, and I thought that it was a breakdown of, it just wasn't the same from what I experienced on that. Of course, those were special circumstances, and that is a statewide thing. People have to travel hours to get there, so it's a little different, but I think having been on that board where you didn't have to be there and here where you have to be in present, I think it does build relationships and discussions better if you're personally present. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Boykin.
First, I'd like to say that I concur with the chairman's opinion about us being here in person, but I'd also acknowledge Mr. Middleton's comments. I mean, things are out of our control, and there may potentially be a compromise. The first thing I want to make sure we get done is that we give the chairman the authority to be able, in an emergency situation where we cannot meet together, the ability to have a meeting remotely. And I use the example like we talked about before, that if the bridges go out or some situation like that, and members physically, we can't get a quorum here. We can't get a quorum here to even vote to say it's an emergency. So in that situation, there has to be some avenue for the chairman to take that action. It'll be extreme. It'll be very rare situations, but that's one thing I want to bring back up again. Secondly, to Mr. Middleton's point, I think for me, if the will of the body is to have remote attendance, that I would, I couldn't go more than maybe 2 opportunities in a calendar year for that, and then that member would choose when to use those opportunities. I think Pickens has got a good idea, but I mean I could find some maybe room for compromise there. But
Okay, Mr. Werman, and then I'll go to Ms. Honeycutt.
Well, I think, I'd raised my hand before Mr. Boykin was done, and he wound up kind of covering. I just wanted to clarify. I mean, it sounds like we're talking about 2 sort of separate situations here. One is the, natural disaster where we've kind of got this catch-22 where we really can't meet in person, but you have to meet in person to make the rule that you don't have to meet in person under the current sort of setup. So obviously, I can't imagine anyone would have an issue with changing that. I certainly would support that. And then, to Mr. Boykin's compromise, I would be sort of along those lines to support something, like that. I love you all, but I think that a big part of why we do need to place some importance on being in person is not for us necessarily, but for the folks who come here. And so, I do think that has to be weighed in the analysis, but I don't have any issue with 1 or 2 times, something like that a year.
Ms. Honeycutt?
I just wanted to add to what I said earlier real quick, and I would incorporate the chairman's approval of that remote attendance and the 24-hour notice that was mentioned in the other ordinances. Thank you.
Ms. Honeycutt?
So I've had a lot of time to think about this since the last time we discussed it, and there have actually been several public comments of deep concern that I feel like it was important for me to face my constituents and other members to face their constituents who had concerns. So I do have serious concerns about allowing members to vote while not present. So I would make the motion that we direct staff to come up with an emergency alternative solution to calling for an emergency order if we cannot get here by the chairman, but that we proceed and require attendance for meetings in order to vote. I would also ask that we make some accommodation in the minutes to recognize people who are in attendance by Zoom. That's my motion.
Okay, is there a second before I make my comments?
I'll second it.
Okay, you second it, and then we go back to discussion. Well, I think I've been, I am the longest serving person on council, and I do take this seriously because in my years of being here, Ms. Salisbury, I can tell you, I don't miss a meeting, and I take it seriously. But however, you know, we never know what the circumstances may bring, and I was open to maybe 2 meetings a year, and you know, you miss those 2 meetings, that's it. But participating via Zoom or on the screen and not being able to vote, to me, it just doesn't make any sense. Now, it's not like we're doing this every meeting, and when you say face the constituents, well, the constituents has got a big screen up there that they can look at, and they can see that member no matter where he or she is at. But sometimes circumstances arise, and you know, it's just like our parole board. They don't meet in person anymore. Everybody meets via Zoom, and then they listen to the keys, and they cast their vote. It's because people live in different places, different times, and they have things to do. So it's not like we trying to start something new or reinvent the wheel. It's going on now. And so I think what Reverend Middleton was trying to do is just get us into the 21st century, you know, and just say, hey, look, let us start with this. But I don't think nobody on this body is going to stay home and just say, I'm not coming tonight, and then says I want to vote if they don't have an emergency. And so I would ask this body to, you know, to really think about this, because, you know, sometimes we do things and then it turns around and ends up biting us in the butt. You know, just because, you know, I'm not singling nobody out saying this is something different, but my philosophy is, you know, we give it a try. If it doesn't work, we can always change it. But nothing beats a failure but not to try. And so that's my take on it. And I thought that I really was thinking about 4 meetings once every quarter. But, you know, I would compromise to just say 2 meetings a year, and let's see how that works. And if we want to change it, we can either go more or go less. And that's just my take. Mr. Boykin?
Just to follow up, Ms. Salisbury?
Yes, sir.
I didn't want to guess. I knew you'd probably know this better than I would. You know, I know we try to meet once every week, but we have months that we don't meet and holidays and so forth. Can you tell me about how many meetings we have generally in a calendar year? It
If
can be
we count committees and
Yes, ma'am.
council meetings, then I would say we have 45-ish, because
Okay.
generally we have 1 meeting a week, but in July and August, we only have 2 meetings during those months, and then in November, typically, we only have 3 meetings.
So my rudimentary calculations, those 2 meetings would equate to 5% out of 100% as far as not being here. I think it could be a fair compromise, but if we do it, I would like to, again, include the 24-hour notice and the chairman's authority to approve or not approve. But that's not the motion before us right now, but that was my discussion.
Mr. Chair, also just to add to this discussion, we do have the opportunity for citizens via public comment that they can be able to leave those public, they can come here and sign in, or they can lodge those online. And before each of these meetings, the clerk sends out, okay, these number of comments came online, and we read those. There are individuals who barrage our emails electronically each time before these meetings based on certain issues, and they advocate for themselves. There are citizens that call us up directly. And so it's not an evasion or not being willing to face individuals, because even when I've attended virtually, I could see the panel, those who are operating the technology, they can show the entire audience, every single person. When I speak virtually, they can spotlight me and I can be seen on the screen. And so I don't really get that.
And my take is, I don't want anybody to think that we're trying to avoid, or somebody's trying to avoid the public by not showing up to a meeting. I don't think that's the intent. And so let's make that perfectly clear. Everybody's willing to face their constituents, good or bad. You know, we up here, we got elected, and we must face, whether we like it or not, the constituents. So, I'm not going to run away from the citizens. I'm going to answer their question, and they may not like my answer, but, that's me. I have the final vote, but I will listen. Mr. Moody?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Pryor. Just a comment of flexibility, since I've been on council under Judge Rawl, Chairman Summey, Chairman Pryor, Chairman Sass, never has the chairman not been willing, if somebody couldn't be here, to move something. Some nights are busier and more critical than others. And every chairman I've ever worked under was always willing to punt something to the following council meeting if somebody couldn't make it here. So we've got a history of flexibility where bigger and important issues are.
I think all of the issues are big and important, and certainly moving an issue is not the issue. All of the issues are equally as important, no big thing, no little thing, just an agenda, and participating in whatever's before us that day, being able to fully engage, period.
Mr. Boykin?
Ms. Honeycutt, would you be willing to amend your motion to just the 2 meetings allowed to attend remotely with the approval of the chairman with 24 hours notice?
I want to make clear, the comments I made were not because I thought people were evading people that were coming to talk, but we don't know who's going to come to public comment. We are to be here to hear them, regardless of who it is and what it is they're bringing before us. That's what we were elected to do, and our elected officials want to see us when they come here to bring their concerns before us. I will allow for, I guess, test purposes, 1 council meeting, not committee, but council meeting a year to amend my motion. If that passes, it passes. If it doesn't out of committee, I understand. But I really do think it's important that we are here consistently, and I understand that there's the 21st century. But I also think that we have a responsibility to be physically present. That's what we were elected to do and should do.
Okay.
I'll second her amendment. Oh, sorry, you have to. I'm sorry.
I'll agree to that.
All right, so before I go to Mr. Kabrowski, let me understand what you're saying. You're saying the majority was saying they wanted to allow up to 1 meeting,
Council meeting.
1 council meeting. So is it 1 council and 1 committee? Why not committee?
I feel like if you're wanting to vote on an issue for council purposes and you cannot be physically present, that it's the council vote that's probably takes more importance. So to Mr. Reverend Middleton's point, if he cannot be available for a particular meeting because, some of our council members were out of town on a trip for council purposes, but couldn't participate in the meeting we had, that the council meeting is more important.
But it has to get out of committee before it gets to council too. So that's why I say, if you're going to just do council, I think you're hamstring, because if we got an important issue that needs to come from out of committee to council, then that person doesn't have a chance to participate, because a lot of important votes take action in committee. So I would ask that you consider 1 committee and 1 council meeting, and that person would have to figure out which committee meeting or which council meeting they're going to miss, because I think just to say council meeting, I think it does more harm than good.
I don't see the difference, but I'll allow that amendment. But it is one meeting, whether council or committee, that you can miss and vote at. You can attend any meeting you want remotely, but if you want to actually vote, you will need to get the permission of the chair.
So
I'll be there.
So let me ask this question, why would we have to get the permission of the chair and all of us are equal? The chair just runs the meeting. It should be left up to that person to call the clerk and say, look, I can't make this meeting tonight. I'd like to do it virtual and vote by virtual, because I think putting that responsibility on the chair may cause more conflict.
I agree.
I should have stated it, not permission from the chair, but notice to the chair that you will
Which is
not
the
be
clerk,
there, but
too.
you intend to vote.
Yeah,
Yes.
notice the clerk, and then the clerk can notify the.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I raised this issue and brought it. I would like to move to table the entire
Table takes precedent.
thing.
A table takes precedent. Is there a second?
I would second.
Okay, so only committee members can vote, but I'm going to go back to Mr. Kabrowski.
Okay, I just thought of one other possible exception. I know I recently missed 2 meetings, and sometimes a person is sick. I was
Right.
quarantined, and I didn't want to get anybody else sick, but I was capable of participating, but out of respect, I didn't come. So I wonder if there's a possibility of exceptions for if you're ill or sick.
COVID or something.
And another time I had a operation, I couldn't drive or come, but I could have been at home and voted.
Yes,
I
sir.
wonder if that's
Well, it's tabled now, so
Yeah,
that.
that was the point exactly. But I would like to table it because,
Yeah, we have to vote,
yeah, exactly the point. And so at some point, I would like for us, you know, and I love everybody, so I don't want this to turn into, you know, a divisive issue. But at some point, there are extenuating circumstances. Nobody wants to, you know, just be on vacation or leisurely and decide that we're going to, you know, kind of opt in. You know, there are circumstances where individuals, and I have been deathly ill and still drag myself on Zoom. And so, again, there are circumstances that would make sense for individuals to participate this way. But based on where we are right now, I brought it because I wanted the discussion to be had. There are other bodies, elected bodies like school boards, that use this indiscriminately, and they function just fine, and they're not fist fighting. It's just an option. But I would like to table this discussion and move on.
Okay, it's been seconded. Who seconded it? Joe seconded it, okay.
Instead of tabling it, but could you do something, defer it to a certain meeting or defer it indefinitely?
That's-
Tabling only occurs during this meeting. So if you table something, you either have to take it up during this meeting or it goes away.
You can bring it back.
I'm not going to bring it back up myself. Personally, I have one more year, and so I plan to come. But it just doesn't make sense to not have the option.
Yes, sir.
You still want to table and then
Yeah,
that's been
table
seconded.
it, and then,
All right.
you know, new
But,
council, other people, you know, somebody's going to be in the circumstance where they will be on Zoom, and it doesn't have to be an important vote, but you want to participate.
Okay, so committee members, all in favor of the table signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, this motion is tabled. That concludes our Administration Policy and Rules Committee agenda. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Moody?
We'll call the Planning and Public Works Committee agenda meeting. All members of council will participate and are voting members. First item is approval of minutes from 9/21.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Middleton.
Second.
Any corrections?
Commendations
deletions?
to the clerk.
Thank you.
Thank
All in
you.
favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 2,
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Honeycutt.
this is an item that I have brought up. You all have heard from members of the Woodland Shores community, and I would like to make a motion that we begin the traffic calming process. Normally, when request for speed humps is made, we have a petitioning process that goes to the county, but this is a unique circumstance on Woodland Shores Road in that the state law does not permit us to install speed humps in an area where the speed limit is greater than 25 miles per hour. So under these circumstances, I would ask and move at this time
Second.
that we begin the petitioning process, that it include both a question to the affected owners of, one, do they agree with the speed limit reduction from 30 to 25 miles per hour? And two, do they agree with the installation of the 8 speed humps that would have to be installed on Woodland Shores Road in accordance with traffic calming guidelines of placing them every 300 to 500 feet? And then we would direct staff to do that. They would bring back to us the funding option. So that's my
Second.
motion.
Second.
Thank you, Reverend Middleton. Madam Clerk, did you get all that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Ms. Honeycutt, I understand, or maybe Mr. Thigpen or somebody, we have some results from some traffic studies and other data that we can share with council tonight?
Yes, sir, we do. Ms. Toma will be giving those to you.
So in your packets, I did include a memo with a study that we did to look at the speed. As Councilwoman Honeycutt said, the problem is the speed limit is 30 miles per hour. State law does not allow you to put speed humps on a road that is 30 miles per hour. So what we decided to do was do a speed study to see if we could justify lowering the speed to 25 miles per hour. First, I'll say, based on the volumes from our speed study, this road is classified as a minor collector road. It had over 2,000 vehicles a day on it. There are a lot of homes, but it also connects Riverland and Maybank, so people do use it. So typically, historically, we look at 85th percentile when we look at setting the speed. However, a lot of engineers now are looking at 50th percentile, which what this means is 50% of the cars are going 29.8 miles per hour or more. 85th means 15% are going roughly 35 miles per hour or more. So that kind of helps you set the speed, knowing what the feel is. So we use two methods and looking at setting the speed limit to see if it would qualify for 25 mile per hour. And one is called U.S. limits. And there was another one that one of our engineers found to kind of look through it. And these characteristics you got to fill in to look at what the speed limit should be is 85th percentile, 50th percentile, the geometry, the crash history, the pedestrian and cyclist activity, the sight distance. You have to input all this data into a software program, and it spits out what the speed limit should be. And both methods showed 30 miles per hour as the speed. So it would not qualify for speed humps. However, with the motion that Councilwoman Honeycutt just made, if you add to the petition to ask people, do you want to lower the speed limit to 25, although the engineer recommendation says 30, and do you want speed humps? We can certainly mail out a petition to every homeowner.
Questions for Mr. Toma? Yes, sir. Mr. Orman, or Mr. Pryor.
Thank you. So if 75% of the neighborhood says they want the speed limit lowered, then we would be inclined to lower that because it's going to take 75% of the residents to make that happen, correct?
That is not our policy, but that is what the motion is on the table, correct? Is to follow the same procedure as you would speed
So
humps.
what would the regular procedure be?
The regular procedure would be, we would not even mail out the procedure, the petition, because it does not qualify for speed humps, because the road is at 30 miles per hour,
Okay,
which
so-
it should be 30 miles per hour.
Any liability issues if we do something out of our regular norm?
Oh, hold on 1 minute. So consequences of lowering the speed limit, there is evidence that you could cause more rear end collisions, because if the road is at the field where people should be going 30, they're going 35, then the person in the front could be going the speed limit, the person behind them could not, so you could have more rear end collisions. You're also going to increase non-compliance, of course, because, again, the speed limit is showing it should be 30. But if you have the speed humps, maybe they wouldn't even be able to get up that high, so.
Okay, and secondly, I talked to Ms. Honeycutt earlier today and told her I would be inclined to support this, if that's what the residents want. But my word to her was, what if the next neighborhood, somebody comes and asks to do the same thing? I would like to see us treated the same way, because I was telling her about Mr. Darby and what he had on Gaynor Avenue with the big trucks coming through, and we were trying to do some common methods to that as well, too. So I would hope that this body, if this goes through, would treat every neighborhood the same way, because safety is safety. I don't care which neighborhood is in. But I will support this, and when they come back with a recommendation and the funding, then that will be the final vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Basically, I was going to ask the same thing. What downsides would there be, if any, to lowering the speed limit? And that answers my question, but I do tend to think that whatever consequences those might be probably don't, at least from safety perspective, I think if this comes with the speed humps, which is sort of the goal, I'm not particularly concerned with the safety issues of lowering the speed. So, yeah, I'm happy to support this, but thank you.
Anybody else? Couple questions, Mr. Toma. When if we were to do this on Woodland Shores Road, I know the makeup and how that's kind of a triangle there. Is this going to divert traffic from other places? So if somebody goes, well, I'm not going to go down there because I've got 8 speed humps to go over 25 miles. I'll speed up and go speed through somebody else's road to avoid that. Is it going to create problems elsewhere?
So, yes, sir, that is in my memo. So if a lot of people don't like to use collector roads if they have speed humps. So this could very well likely increase those people that need to go down Riverland instead of taking Woodland Shores. They probably will go to Maybank and turn left on Riverland, which, as y'all know, that's an intersection with a lot of accidents. So we're increasing the volume, and we could potentially be making that intersection more unsafe.
Do we, I think, Ms. Honeycutt, your proposal, it looks a lot like the municipalities, what they generally do. Is that sort of what you're after, is to kind of
These are actually our traffic calming guidelines.
Okay.
So we do this. We
Okay.
collect,
I didn't know
and
that.
it's 75% of the owners that are adjacent to the roadway, 50% of owners who can only access it by the roadway.
Okay,
So those
understood.
on the adjacent road.
Do we, Mr. Toma, do we check with EMS and fire and sheriff's deputies and see what their thoughts are? Because I know
We-
that typically those
Right.
folks are not in favor of this stuff because it slows them down.
So we have not, so as you can see, for our traffic calming program that we have in place, we normally wouldn't have mailed out the petition in the first place because of the speed limit. But other requirements are the petition, and we do have to get the feedback from the first responders. So we have not taken that step because we weren't even going to mail out the petition until this point. So we will certainly have to get their feedback as well as part of our traffic calming program.
Okay. Any other questions? Motion's been on the floor and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. We have need, Mrs. Ham, for an executive session. Can you tell us what we need to do?
Yes, sir. We are having an executive session to receive legal advice prior to the consideration of the historic preservation items.
Chairman, before we make that motion, wouldn't it be wise for us to discuss 4, and then go in there, because what we about to discuss on 4 is not, it doesn't require legal advice, and I think most of us have already spoken to Ms. Ham about what's going on, so I don't want to make it look like we going in an executive session, and then we come back out in the public doesn't know, so I think we ought to forward the public. And then, if it needs to go in there for legal advice, concerning the lawsuit, then I think that should be the last thing to discuss versus vice versa. That's just my opinion.
Mr. Pryor, you have something you want to say?
Well, I just wanted to clarify that the executive session is not specific to a lawsuit. It's specific to the actual amendments.
I think, my personal opinion is, I think we ought to hear from Ms. Ham before we take up either of those items. Mr. Kabrowski.
I'd like to second what Councilman Pryor said.
Was not a motion.
I
it
thought
was
it was a
discussion.
motion.
Well, I just, Mr. Browski, if you allow me to, I just think it makes sense to do it that way. But I mean, if the attorney wants us to discuss something legal, I will go in the back for only just something legal, but not discuss anything about number 4 until we come back out into the public.
Motion.
Mr. Kabrowski, Mr. Boykins
A
next.
point of clarification. The point of the executive session is for you to discuss the ordinances. So why would we not take advice from our own counsel to have, it won't do us any good, after the fact. So we need to have that information before we make a vote on this, because that's germane to what she wants to talk to us
Is
about.
that a motion, Mr. Boykin?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Second.
We had
Motion, Mr.
two or three motions that we're trying to get up off the ground
One
before
motion,
that.
Supervisor.
Okay, I don't know.
I didn't make a motion, but I'm saying, I don't think nobody was going to vote on this thing until we actually go back in the executive session and get advice and come back out. But, I don't have a problem, but like I said, if it gets to where it's not basically for the ordinance and then it gets to these other stuff, then I want to come back
Shut it
out
down.
because I want the public to be engaged. This is important.
Mr. Kabrowski.
I would agree to go in executive session. I think it's bifurcated. There's one issue about the potential or existing lawsuit, and I would agree, but the issue of the amendment to the existing regulations is not a current lawsuit. I would say that I would agree to executive session about an existing lawsuit, but not as to the public discussion of whether or not to amend the historic commission regulations. That would be my motion.
Mr. Middleton, well, let me get Mr. Middleton. He had one call.
No, I don't.
All right, properly moved and seconded motion. All those in favor of executive session say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes.
Nay.
No nays. 2 nays. Kabrowski and Middleton. Darby.
Prior.
Okay. It's 5 ayes, 4 nays. We're in executive session.
It's good for the gander.
All right, we are back from executive session. No motions were made, no votes were taken. We are back in Planning and Public Works.
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion.
Ms.
I'd like
Honeycutt,
to
go
move
ahead.
to approve items 4A and 4B.
Second.
Ms. Pryor, you second, Mr. Boykin? Okay. Mr. Pryor.
Could we get an explanation to the public on, what we're doing so the public will know what's going on? Because we have staff explain to the public what they explain to us. Can we do that?
You have make that.
It's already there.
Recommend, sir.
Well, we have the presentation that was given to, so.
Mr. Pryor, can we watch this presentation and see if that answers your question?
Yeah, I just
If
want
that
to answer.
satisfies-
It
Yep.
answers mine, but I'm talking about the public. I think
Absolutely.
the public needs to know.
Let's see this. Go ahead.
The third motion.
Good evening. Tonight, I'll be giving a brief presentation regarding proposed amendments to the Historic Preservation Ordinance, as well as related ZLDR and fee schedule updates. First, we'll just briefly discuss how we got to where we are today in terms of historic preservation regulation at the county. In April of 2014, the Planning Commission established the Historic Preservation Committee to help implement the goals and strategies of the cultural resources element of the comprehensive plan, specifically protecting historic African American communities from inconsistent development and preserving structures that are important to the history of the county to prevent demolition of significant structures like the Limehouse Produce Shed, which was raised in 2013. The Historic Preservation Committee established their own goals, which included updating the county's Historic Resources Survey. This project was completed in 2016 with funding from the State Historic Preservation Office. Additionally, the committee sought to revise the county's historic preservation regulations because at that time, they only provided protections for properties listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The current Historic Preservation Ordinance was created as a result of these efforts. So the current Historic Preservation Ordinance was adopted in August of 2018, and it accomplishes the following. First, it sets up a Historic Preservation Commission. Next, it establishes a process to designate historic properties and districts. And lastly, it creates a process where proposed changes to historic properties and districts are reviewed and determined to be appropriate in their historic context. So while the Historic Preservation Ordinance is separate from the zoning ordinance, there is language in the ZLDR that helps implement the Historic Preservation Ordinance. For example, Chapter 3, Development Review Procedures, discusses the notification requirements for applications reviewed by the Historic Preservation Commission. Chapter 3 also states that, when applicable, certificates of historic appropriateness shall be obtained prior to site plan review approval. Chapter 8, Subdivision Regulations, states that a certificate of historic appropriateness is required prior to subdivision plat approval for properties located within 300 feet of historic properties and districts. To date, there have been 3 properties and 3 districts designated as historic at the county level. These properties include the Hebron Center on Johns Island and St. Mark UME and Bethel AME churches in the Red Top community. Additionally, the Phillips and 10 Mile communities in the East Cooper area, as well as the Beefield community on James Island, have been designated as historic districts. Recently, the Historic Preservation Commission requested guidance on restructuring the approval criteria for certificates of historic appropriateness in order to help with their decision-making. When reviewing the ordinance, the following additional changes were identified and proposed. First, removing the ability of the commission to nominate historic properties and districts. Next, update the application requirements for all application types. Third, clarify the process for removing individual properties from historic districts. Fourth, create a process for certain certificates of historic appropriateness to be reviewed at the staff level. Next, update the requirements for demolition and clearing and grubbing requests. Following that, add language regarding emergency permits and ordinary maintenance of property. Require Board of Zoning Appeals approval prior to Historic Preservation Commission review as applicable. And create an opportunity for conceptual plan workshops and encouraging community workshops. Continuing on, removing subdivision plat application approval from the HPC's purview because Section 629-340 of South Carolina state law places the authority of subdivision regulation under the powers and duties of the Planning Commission. Number 10, clarify the list of exemptions for certificates of historic appropriateness and simplify the approval criteria. Simplify the process for modifications to approve certificates of historic appropriateness. Create a process to amend historic properties and districts to identify contributing resources, area character appraisals, and other supporting documentation. Add posted notice requirements for certain application types. Update the definitions section, and we also made clerical amendments throughout. In addition to these amendments to the Historic Preservation Ordinance, an amendment to the fee ordinance is proposed in order to include a fee for processing applications to amend historic properties and districts. The following amendments to the ZLDR are also proposed to complement the changes being suggested in the Historic Preservation Ordinance. Within Chapter 3, Development Regulations, remove historic preservation applications from Table 3.1.6, require BZA decisions prior to HBC decisions as applicable, and require site plans to be in an approvable state prior to placement on an HBC agenda. Additionally, in Chapter 8, Subdivision Regulations, remove all references to subdivision plats requiring certificates of historic appropriateness approvals. At the August Planning Commission meeting, the proposed ZLDR amendments received a recommendation of approval. 5 individuals spoke regarding the amendments, 2 of which were in opposition, and we also received 36 letters in opposition to the proposed amendments to Chapter 8 Subdivision Regulations. At the August Historic Preservation Commission meeting, the Historic Preservation Ordinance amendments were presented for informational purposes, and 6 individuals spoke in opposition to the proposed changes. Additionally, 8 letters in opposition to the proposed amendments regarding subdivision were received in advance of that meeting. Prior to the public hearing on the 12th, we received an additional 20 letters in opposition to the amendments regarding subdivision. At the public hearing, 15 individuals also spoke regarding the proposed amendments. And before tonight's meeting, 8 additional letters in opposition to the subdivision changes were received. And we did notice as required. Thank you.
Public to be aware, but
Okay.
I also want the public to be aware that the 10 Mile has asked us to help them develop an overlay district. Is that correct? Mr. Evans?
Yes, sir.
Can you explain to them what you explained to us about the overlay district they're trying to get, and we're trying to help it as fast as we can? And that will, you say, alleviate what, help them what they're trying to do, correct?
Yeah, from what we understand, they want a different density, a different lot size, and that is the method that they've got that information in the overlay district. The staff is in the process of reviewing it. We're going to be working with the community to get that through the process.
Okay, thank you.
Foreman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is actually more of a question for Ms. Honeycutt and whoever did the second.
An amendment of third reading.
Amendment of third reading.
Accepted.
Thank you.
Second.
Make another motion?
If they would be accepted, there's a properly moved and seconded motion on the floor right now and amended, as amended.
Is that no?
That's a no,
Okay.
unless they want to accept your amendment.
Okay, well, I'll just put it on the table and they can make that decision. I'd like to make a motion to bifurcate this, to give our attorney the ability to negotiate the lawsuit that exists because of facts that were in existence before this commission was created in 2018. So I think we can bifurcate that, and I'd like to table the amendment until the change in the commission regulations until the overlay stuff comes in front of us, because it's not here now. That would be my counter motion. To bifurcate it and give our attorney the right to negotiate a settlement.
Mrs. Honeycutt, would you accept that amendment?
Well, it's not an amendment,
Or-
and so
or
no.
a
I'll
motion
accept
to
the new
change it?
motion.
Yep. Okay. Mr. Kroski, any other comments?
That wasn't, okay, yes, and then I do have comments.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, thank you. You know, this, today about the Preservation Historic Commission, which was adopted in August of 2018. I'd like to publicly state that that was written with the direction of our attorney at the time, a different one, who was paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, I assume was getting good advice. And nothing in state law has changed one iota in any way, shape, or form since 2018 to now. Nothing has changed. In 2018 to now, that's 5 years. And Many people listening are wondering, how our county has changed radically and what we love and what's unique about us is eroding. This is how it happens. You're seeing it in real time. You take these rights away from the Historic Preservation Commission, and I predict 5 years, 10 years from now, there's nothing there. My wife is from McClellanville, as I said. Since 1979, I've been using, on Highway 17, I've been up and down this road thousands of times. This is the next frontier. The developers have already built out subdivisions, Park West, Carolina Park rather, Dunes West. The 10-mile area, the heart of where we're here about today, is the next point of development. You do this today, in 5 or 10 years from now, it won't exist as we know it at 10 mile. They'll all be subdivision out. If you take away the right for them to regulate the land, it's the density, the very things that we're gutting is what keeps it unique. Now remember, this is a historic community that's doing exactly what the Historic Preservation Commission was supposed to do. We have something unique in America here. The people that live there, we should treasure what they have. The blood, sweat, and tears of all the years that have gone, and the continuity and existence of it is something we should be preserving, not looking for ways to end. You do this today, it will cease to exist as we know it. We have two issues here today. There's no reason why our attorney can't negotiate a settlement. As I understand it, there was approval of things for the set of developers before this historic commission was created. It has nothing to do with the amendment. We shouldn't rush today. If they're going to come with an overlay district, let's wait to see what that happens until we gut it. I just think, I just read in the paper today, they're going to hold up the clear cutting of the forest in Cainhoy for 18,000 homes because of long-eared bats. Well, certainly the historic black communities and the preservation of what we have at 10 Mile and at Phillips is equally as important. And I ask
Than
you,
a long-eared bass?
Hang on.
I think that would be more important, I think, than
Hang on,
that.
let him finish.
I'm sorry.
Let him finish.
I'm saying they held up the development in Cainhoy because of that. And I'm saying we have something unique and special that we should preserve that's infinitely more important. So my point is we shouldn't rush into this. If we're going to change and amend, we should wait till the overlay regulations come into effect. We haven't done that yet. And I just, again, we will change the character of those communities. The very nature of that allows them to preserve what they have will be gone if we do this today.
Thank you, Mr. Grossi. Mr. Boykin.
Mr. Kabrowski, I appreciate the passion in your voice and your good intentions, but I'm going to bring us back to front and center. I would contend to you that this ordinance was defective the day it went on the books because it was contrary to state law and is still contrary to state law as it relates to subdivisions. Nothing's changed. It was wrong then, it's wrong now, we're fixing it. And secondly, I would bring about the point that counties derive all their authority from the state. They giveth and they can taketh away. But we are bound to follow the state. They are a sovereign above us. So there's no reason for us to remain contrary to state law, and this is a needed cure. And we were informed by our attorney that this decision to amend these ordinances has nothing to do with a lawsuit.
There is such a thing as home rule, isn't there?
Mr. Worman, would you like to speak?
I would. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for indulging me once again. Listen, Mr. Kabrowski, I sympathize a lot with you, and that's one of the reasons I did want to keep amendment up to third reading. I think there are some adjustments that can be made, maybe some sort of advisory capacity maintained in the subdivisions context. But, I mean, I have to say, like, we've talked a little bit about an overlay. We might just have to face the fact that the initial goals of this ordinance really cannot be used with, this tool is constrained by state law on some level, and I think we need to push it to that line and utilize it as much as we can. But if another tool needs to come into action, I think you'll find a lot of energy from certainly me and I hope others on this council to implement any stopgap measures that need to be implemented. Get these overlays, done quickly, because if our goal is to really accomplish the original purposes of the ordinance, we need to do it in a way that's going to hold up. So, I've got some issues with it as currently drafted. As I sort of mentioned there, I'll work with folks to try and get something that maybe we can make some amendments. But I do think that core issue is not going to go away, regardless of what we do today. Thank you.
Did you want to? I can. Well, I'm not asking if you can. I'm asking if you want to.
Well, I was just trying to be, I think Mr. Tootin said to be methodical. I think it's a term that he used. Well, firstly, I appreciate the passion and the zeal and the zealousness of Mr. Gabrowski, because too often you don't find that with someone who doesn't reside in the African-American community or is not of that culture. I'm very appreciative of that. It was something that I've been fighting for years to preserve. So I commend you on that, sir, because too often you don't see that. Just a short history, Mr. Gabrowski. African Americans right after Civil War Reconstruction,
Speak into the mic.
without any type of education, amassed over 23 million acres of land. You can imagine how arduous it took. And today, African Americans in this country own less than 1.1 million acres of land. And when it comes down to state law, which is legal, just because it's state law doesn't make it right. If you remember Hitler's Germany, everything the Nazis did was legal. So just because it's legal doesn't make it right. I think St. Thomas Aquinas said an unjust law is no law at all. But the point I want to make here, too often when it comes down to black lands, African Americans is self-inflicted. Self-inflicted. We do this to ourselves. And I get so upset when African Americans sell land that their parents and grandparents and great-grandparents worked so hard to do, and they end up selling it for $1. And then the dollar's gone, but the land is still there. My question would be, how did we get here? How did this developer get in this community if somebody of an African-American culture didn't sell it to him? Now, if you sold it to him and now you're here to say, what? That's almost a hypocrisy. How did it get there? I don't know. Somebody had to sell something. So this is self-inflicted. I'm sad and disappointed to say that because it really hurts. It really hurts. Because it is going to dwindle in years to come because you sold your own land. And heaven help me. My father had a second-grade education. That's as far as he could go because Williamsburg County said that's as far as his generation would get. That's as far he could, second grade. But he built a home and purchased 3/4 of an acre. And I told my children, if you sell this land, I'm coming out of my grave. Because people work too hard for this land. And black folk will sell land. Something wrong with us.
Amen. Amen.
I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Darby.
Can I have one brief
One more
comment?
quickly.
I'll say it briefly. I believe, again, this weekend, there is ambiguity in the state law. I don't think it's as clear as we've been presented. It's ambiguity enough for us to preserve what we have and wait till we get those, whatever amendments come forth on the overlay district till we do this. Again, it would be irreversible. We would gut the whole means of preserving what is unique and special. And I thank Councilman Darby, but again, we're seeing in real time how the eroding of what we treasure about Charleston was unique in our history. This is another step in that process. And from having traveled that road for thousands of times and seeing the communities there and what we're going to lose today and what we'll gain is this more subdivisions that won't stop till they're all the way to the county line at the Santee River. This is the next frontier. It's right after the existing subdivisions. We're not here, we should be looking at the welfare of the people who live in Charleston County, who have blood, sweat, and tear preserved their ancestors' land. We're not here to, for the profits of developers or contractors. We're here for the people that live here. And I believe that's who I represent, and this is in my district. And I believe it's what's special, unique in the district and in all of America. And it would be incumbent upon us to preserve and protect what we can and not help the process of eroding it.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Before we take the vote, Mr. Darby, something you said last week got me to thinking, and I asked Mr. Evans what the county had done in collaboration with different communities and neighborhoods. And Mr. Evans, would you mind telling us what steps county staff took to, please go to the microphone, to advise all the neighborhoods, all the stakeholders, what steps county staff took to make sure everybody was well informed?
We sent 1,334 parties of interest notice for the planning, for the public hearing and for the HPC meeting, for the public planning commission meeting and for the public hearing. We did that twice, 1,334. We met with folks from the representatives from the East Cooper settlement communities, 4 Mile, 6 Mile, Hamlin, 7 Mile, 10 Mile, Phillips, and Snowden communities to go over the ordinance changes. We met with Mr. Richard Habersham with the Phillips community and went over the ordinance changes with him, representing the Phillips community. And most recently, we met with 9 members from the Snowden community. They are interested in becoming a historic district. And so that we just walked through the process of what.
Thank you for taking that run up to make sure everybody was involved. Let's call the question. Ms. Honeycutt has made a motion. Mr. Boykin properly seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Mr. Krabrowski, Mr. Darby, nays. 7 ayes, 2 nays. Mr. Chairman Sass, this ends Planning and Public Works.
Thank you, sir. Welcome, everyone, to this October 5th, 2005 Finance Committee meeting. First item, approval of minutes.
Second.
Prior, seconded by Mr. Moody. All in
Middleton.
favor?
I got it.
Oh, Mr. Middleton, I'm sorry.
It's okay, we can give it to him.
Reverend
I'm not
Middleton.
here the next time. I want my name recorded, you know.
I need to get a hearing aid on this side. Thank you all. Any questions, deletions? Hearing
No.
none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Yes,
For
sir.
approval, 2A through G.
Moved by Mr. Pryor, seconded by Ms. Reverend Middleton. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Move for approval on items 3 and 4.
Second.
Moved and seconded, items 3 and 4 by Mr. Pryor and Mr. Middleton. Any discussion? Do we need any video on these two items? Is there a presentation for these at all? None? Okay, thank you very much. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you all very much. Yes, sir.
You adjourn, I'd just like to say, Mr. Darby, that's why I love you, brother. You always come up and you make people think and you tell it like it is. And that's why we've been able to get along for so long over these last 20 years. You know, you put the liability where the liability should be. And I really appreciate that. You know, even though you voted against it, you asked a question. How did we get here? And that's an answer I think we all need to know.
Thank you, sir.
So, God bless you, Mr. Darby.
Thank you all. This meeting's adjourned.
No.